So
Right.
our celebration of July 4th, 1776, our
Yeah.
celebration of July 4th is when the Declaration was signed. But as you said, the the proposal starts on June 7th, and then goes to I mean, we went from no nation to a new nation in less than 30 days. That's actually quite fast. So especially the way that Congress works today, that's actually quite fast to create a whole
Way
new nation
fast
in
compared
30
to today.
days.
Yes. Yeah, and we weren't actually even called a nation. It was just a country. We were just forming a
Right.
country of united of the independent but United States. So it's just the United States of America. Yeah, and you're right. Of course, Thomas Jefferson and I mean, there was many people collaborating on that. They all in their debating. It's very clear. If you see the play Hamilton, you can see a lot of this play out. Where just by the debating and the discussion they had, it cemented their ideas of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. That
Mhm.
the inalienable rights that we are given by God, that no tyrant should be able to take away or limit. And that was just a very unique concept. There's really no one else, as I said earlier, no other group of people in the history of the world had ever done that against any tyrant. Not in Europe, not in Asia, nowhere. And so it's just an amazing thing. And the Lees, just because they had a lot of influence and they were larger than probably think any other family involved in the revolution. They had a lot to do with what happened after that. And it's just important. It's interesting how it's like, why are we talking about this today? Well, part of the reason we're talking about this today is because most people have no idea. When we say the Lee family, what do most people think? They think of Robert E. Lee, who led the Confederate forces, who lost in the Civil War. Well, because he was on the losing side of the Civil War, and after that, Lee sort of went a little quiet, if you will, because that's what happens when you're on the losing side of things. That therefore, a lot of this history we're talking about today has somewhat been lost. And yet there's a rich history. We're talking about here about from 1765 to 1865. That's 100 years if you start with the demarcation point of those Leestown resolves and go all the way to the end of the Civil War. That's 100 years of Lee's being very involved in the formation of this new country. And it's really not taught. And I know about it because my grandmother told me, "You're a Lee. This is what it means to be a Lee." And my mother told me, "You're a Lee. This is what it means to be a Lee," from her perspective. And it wasn't just, "Oh, you're a descendant of Robert E. Lee." It was you're a Lee, the Lees of Virginia, right? I was told you have two relatives. You're descended from two men who signed the Declaration of Independence. I was like, oh wow, So I kind of grew up with this around the dinner table, you know, and and so I feel privileged that I had that sort of education, even though it was fairly light. We didn't have like big sessions. It wasn't homeschooling with books and charts and everything. It was just talked about. It was understood. And my godfather was a Lee. He was also a general in Vietnam, and he was a Lee. And I would sit with him, and we would talk about the military and about West Point, and I learned about the formation of West Point, and I learned about my grandfather on my father's side, or excuse me, my grandfather on my mother's side, the non-Lease side, the Coulter side, who went to West Point, and he fought under MacArthur. You sort of learn this history, and I feel privileged that was all just part of our normal family conversation. So I had a larger sense of me as part of a family tree that wasn't just my immediate family. And so when I went to college, I guess it's no surprise that I gravitated towards being a history major. And I studied not just American history, but European history, Asian history. But I sort of had this sense of history the fact that I was shared with me that I was part of a larger family that had had a historical impact that affected where I was living today and the country I was living in today, and all the people that I knew were affected by what my family had done generations before, not just Robert E. Lee.
Right. Well, absolutely. Right. And that's so. Let's see. What before we get through. So the Lees are just this